Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands as I stared out the kitchen window. Autumn in New England, it really is something else. The maples across the street were a blaze of glory, fiery reds and golds against a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. It was the kind of quiet Tuesday morning where the loudest sound was the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had been the backdrop to my life in this house for the past 20 years. I'm Eleanor, by the way, and I suppose you could say my life had settled into a comfortable, predictable rhythm. Not a bad rhythm, mind you, just a rhythm, like a favorite old song. You know, all the words to. The phone rang, its shrillness cutting through the calm. I sighed, placing the mug on the granite countertop, the one I'd finally splurged on after the kids left for college. Hello, Ellie, darling. It's Sarah. Sarah, my best friend since kindergarten. Her voice, always a little too loud, a little too enthusiastic, was a familiar comfort. Sarah, what's up? Don't tell me you've adopted another stray cat. She chuckled, a warm, bubbly sound. Not this week. Listen, I have a huge favor to ask. Huge. And you're the only person I can think of. I leaned against the counter. Okay, I'm listening. As long as it doesn't involve bailing someone out of jail or hiding a body. Nothing so dramatic, I promise. It's about Michael. Michael, Sarah's younger brother. I hadn't seen him in, goodness, it must have been close to 10 years. He was a bit of a wanderer, a photographer, always chasing the perfect shot in some remote corner of the world. Last I heard, he was somewhere in South America. He was a good 10 years younger than Sarah and me, putting him squarely in his late 40s now. I remembered him as a lanky, quiet kid who always seemed to be observing rather than participating. Michael, I echoed, surprised. What about him? Well, he's back in the States for a bit. He was supposed to be staying with our cousin Martha in Boston while he sorts out some exhibition details, but Martha's place just had a major pipe burst, flooded the whole guest room. He literally just called me in a panic. Oh no, is he all right? He's fine, just homeless practically. He needs a place to crash for a couple of weeks, maybe 3, tops. And Ellie, your place immediately sprang to mind. You've got that lovely spare room since Mark Jr. moved out, and it's quiet, peaceful, exactly what he needs to focus. He's got a lot on his plate. I hesitated. My spare room, yes, it was lovely. It was also my sanctuary, my painting studio, the one place in the house that was entirely mine, filled with canvases and the scent of turpentine and linseed oil. The idea of a relative stranger, even Sarah's brother, invading that space felt jarring. Oh, Sarah, I don't know. I began. It's just, I'm kind of in the middle of a commission, and I'm a creature of habit, you know that. I know, she cajoled. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He's incredibly considerate. Ellie, honestly, you'd barely know he was there. He's not the wild kid he used to be, if that's what you're picturing. He's Michael, quiet, keeps to himself mostly. I pictured him, a gangly teenager with a camera perpetually hanging from his neck. It was hard to imagine him as a grown man. A couple of weeks, you said? 3 at the absolute most. He just needs a comport in the storm. Please, Ellie, I'd owe you big time. The thing about Sarah is, she rarely asked for big favors. And when she did, it was usually for a good reason. I thought about my quiet house, the empty rooms. Maybe a little disruption wouldn't be the worst thing. And he was Sarah's brother. After all, family almost. All right, I said, sighing dramatically, though a small, unexpected part of me felt a flicker of not excitement exactly, but something other than the usual Tuesday morning calm. He can stay, but if he touches my sable brushes, he's out on his ear. Sarah squealed with delight. Oh, Ellie, you're a lifesaver. Thank you. Thank you. He'll be so relieved. He's driving up from Boston this afternoon. Should be there around 5-ish. This afternoon, I glanced around my kitchen, suddenly seeing it through a stranger's eyes. The lingering scent of my toast, the slightly haphazard stack of mail on the table. Wow, okay. Short notice. I know, I'm sorry. It's all a bit last minute. He'll call you when he's close. And don't worry, he's perfectly capable of ordering takeout. You don't have to fuss over him. I won't, I said, though a part of me was already mentally checking the contents of my refrigerator. Old habits. We chatted for a few more minutes, Sarah filling me in on her latest gardening triumphs. Before hanging up, I stood there in the silence, the grandfather clock ticking away. This afternoon, my quiet, predictable rhythm was about to get a new beat. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. A little apprehensive, certainly, but also curious. What would Michael be like after all these years? The quiet observer, all grown up. I walked into the spare room. It was filled with afternoon light, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. My easel stood in the corner, a half-finished landscape of the Maine coast on it. I'd have to move some things around, make space. It felt strange, preparing this very personal room for someone I barely knew. I hoped Sarah was right, and he'd be the quiet, considerate type. The hours passed in a blur of tidying and mild anxiety. I changed the sheets on the guest bed, aired out the room, and even bought some decent coffee, remembering Sarah mentioning Michael was a bit of a coffee snob. Around 4:30, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hello. Hi, is this Eleanor? A man's voice, deeper than I expected, with a slight, gravelly edge. Pleasant. It is Michael? Yes, hi. Sarah gave me your number. I'm about 20 minutes out. Just wanted to let you know. And to say thanks again for this. You're really helping me out of a bind. It's no problem at all, I said, trying to sound breezy. Drive safe. See you soon. 20 minutes. I took a deep breath. My heart was doing a funny little flutter. Nerves, I told myself. Just nerves about having a house guest. I was standing by the living room window, pretending to read a book, when a battered-looking dark green Jeep pulled into my driveway. It had the look of a vehicle that had seen more than its fair share of rough roads. The driver's door opened, and a man unfolded himself from the seat. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I was just shorter. Lean, dressed in dark jeans and a faded denim shirt, with a worn leather satchel slung across his chest. His hair was darker too, more brown than the sandy blonde of his youth, and shorter, though it still had a slightly untamed look about it. He paused for a moment, looking at the house, his expression unreadable from this distance. Then he moved to the back of the Jeep and started pulling out a couple of duffel bags and a large, heavy-duty camera case. I opened the front door as he approached the porch steps. Michael? He looked up, and for a second, I saw the boy I remembered in his eyes, that same thoughtful, observant gaze. But then he smiled, a slow, slightly tired smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and the boy vanished, replaced by a man. A handsome man, in a rugged, unassuming kind of way. There were lines on his face that hadn't been there before, lines that spoke of sun and wind and experiences I could only imagine. Eleanor. His voice was even better in person. It's been a long time. It certainly has, I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. Welcome. Come on in. He stepped inside, bringing with him a faint scent of something outdoorsy, like pine needles and distant campfires. It was a strange scent to have in my meticulously clean hallway. He looked around, his gaze lingering on the photographs on the wall, the worn runner on the polished wood floor. "Your place is beautiful," he said, his voice soft, exactly as Sarah described it. "Peaceful. Thank you." I gestured towards the stairs. "The spare room is upstairs, first door on the left. Let me give you a hand with those." "I've got it," he said, easily hefting the bags. "You've already done more than enough." I followed him up the stairs, feeling suddenly very aware of his presence in my quiet house. It was like a new piece of furniture had been introduced, one that didn't quite match the existing decor, but was interesting nonetheless. He placed his bags down in the spare room, my studio, and looked around. His eyes scanned my paintings, the stacks of canvases, the jars of brushes. I felt a little self-conscious, like he was seeing a part of me that was usually kept private. "This is a great space," he said, turning to me. "You're a painter?" "I dabble," I said, a little too quickly. "It's mostly a hobby." He nodded, his gaze returning to the landscape on the easel. "You're very talented. This light is incredible." Praise from a renowned photographer about my use of light felt significant. "Thank you," I said, genuinely pleased. "Well, make yourself comfortable. The bathroom is just across the hall. Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks, Eleanor. I appreciate it." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should probably try and get some work done. I'm on a bit of a deadline." "Of course. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. I usually have dinner around 7. You're welcome to join me, but no pressure if you're busy or want to grab something yourself." "Dinner sounds great, if it's not too much trouble." "Not at all." I smiled. "See you later then." I retreated downstairs, my mind whirring. He was different, quieter than I'd even anticipated, yet there was an intensity about him, a focused energy, and those eyes, they really did seem to see everything. My quiet evening was shaping up to be anything but. I found myself wondering what kind of work he was so focused on, what images filled that heavy camera case. The scent of pine needles and distant campfires seemed to linger in the air, a subtle reminder that the predictable rhythm of my life had definitely hit an unexpected note. The next couple of hours were a strange mix of routine and anticipation. I prepped dinner, a simple chicken and roasted vegetable dish, something I hoped was universally acceptable. All the while, I could hear the faint, intermittent sounds from upstairs, the soft tread of footsteps, the occasional muted click, perhaps from his laptop or camera equipment. It wasn't intrusive, but it was there, a constant awareness of another presence in the house. My house, which for so long had echoed only with my own movements. When I called him for dinner, he came down promptly. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, and his hair was slightly damp, as if he'd splashed water on his face. He looked tired, but less stressed than when he'd arrived. "This smells wonderful, Eleanor," he said, as he sat down at my small kitchen table. It felt a little odd, sharing this usually solitary space. "Thank you. It's nothing fancy." We ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. I'm not one for forced conversation, and it seemed Michael wasn't either. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was companionable. So I began, "Finally, Sarah tells me you're working on an exhibition." He nodded, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, it's a retrospective, mostly work from the last 15 years. It's a lot to go through, selecting the pieces, getting them ready. 15 years of travel and photography. That's quite something." I could only imagine the sights he'd seen, the stories hidden in his images. Where has your work taken you, mostly? He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. A lot of remote places. The Andes, the Himalayas, the Australian outback. I'm drawn to landscapes that feel untouched, and the people who live in them. It sounds fascinating and challenging. It is, he admitted, but incredibly rewarding. There's a certain truth you find in those places, in the people, a simplicity, a connection to the earth that we've mostly lost, I think. His words resonated with me. My paintings were often an attempt to capture that same sense of connection, albeit closer to home. The way the light fell on the ocean, the ancient stillness of a forest. I think I understand what you mean, I said softly. He looked at me, then a direct, appraising look that made me feel strangely seen. I thought you might, he said. His gaze dropped to my hands, then back to my face. Sarah mentioned you lost your husband a few years ago. Mark, was it? I was taken aback for a moment. Sarah usually wasn't one to share such personal details without asking. But then, this was her brother. Yes, I said, my voice a little tighter than I intended. Mark, it was 5 years ago. I'm sorry, he said simply. There was no pity in his voice, just a quiet acknowledgement. That must have been hard. It was, I agreed. It still is, sometimes. This house can feel very empty. I hadn't meant to say that last part. It just slipped out. He nodded slowly. Emptiness has a way of making itself known. There was a depth to his statement that suggested he understood more than just the words. We talked a little more after that, about his travels, about the changing seasons in New England, about books we'd read. It was easy, unforced. He was a good listener, and when he spoke, he chose his words carefully, thoughtfully. As we cleared the dishes, he said, "Thank you again for dinner, Eleanor, and for the room. I promise I'll be as unobtrusive as possible. It's really no trouble, Michael, and please don't feel you have to tiptoe around. It's nice to have some company. Actually, it was true. The initial apprehension had faded, replaced by a tentative comfort. He gave me another one of those slow smiles. Good night, Eleanor. Good night, Michael." I listened to his footsteps receding up the stairs. The house fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not empty, but filled with a subtle hum of potential, of a new presence. I found myself looking forward to the next few weeks, a feeling that surprised me with its intensity. The man upstairs was a mystery, in a way, but not an unwelcome one. My best friend's brother. Who knew he'd bring such an unexpected shift to my well-ordered world just by needing a place to stay? The scent of pine needles and distant campfires seemed stronger now, weaving itself into the familiar aroma of my home. The following days settled into a new kind of rhythm. Michael was true to his word. He was incredibly considerate. Most of the day, he'd be in his room, my studio, presumably working. I'd hear the occasional soft sounds, the click of a keyboard, sometimes a low murmur if he was on a call. He'd emerge for coffee in the mornings, and we'd exchange a few pleasantries. He made his own breakfast, usually just toast and fruit, and insisted on cleaning up after himself meticulously. Evenings were when we interacted most. He'd often join me for dinner, and our conversations started to deepen, moving beyond polite small talk. He asked about my painting, and I found myself, rather shyly at first, showing him some of my completed pieces. He had an incredible eye, as I'd expected. He wouldn't just offer generic praise. He'd point out specific details, the way I'd captured a shadow, or the emotion in a particular brushstroke. It was insightful, and incredibly validating. "You have a real gift, Eleanor," he said one evening, looking at a small watercolor of a winter barn I was particularly fond of. "There's a quiet strength in your work, a sense of place." "Thank you, Michael. That means a lot coming from you." He told me more about his own work too, about the challenges of capturing the essence of a place or a person in a single frame. He spoke of long, patient hours waiting for the right light, the right moment. He described the stark beauty of a desert dawn, the overwhelming power of a storm at sea, the resilience in the eyes of people who had very little in material terms but possessed a wealth of spirit. His stories were captivating, painting vivid pictures in my mind. I realized he wasn't just a photographer. He was a storyteller, using images instead of words. Sometimes after dinner, if he wasn't too tired or facing a pressing deadline, we'd sit in the living room. I'd read or sketch idly in a notepad, and he'd often have his laptop sifting through images. Occasionally, he'd turn the screen towards me. "What do you think of this one?" he'd ask, showing me a stunning black and white portrait of an old woman with a face like a roadmap of her life, or a breathtaking landscape that seemed to stretch into infinity. His photographs were powerful. They weren't just pretty pictures. They had a soul. They made you feel something, and sharing them with me, asking for my opinion, felt intimate. It was a glimpse into his world, his passion. I learned that he was a private man, not in a secretive way, but in a way that valued solitude and introspection. He didn't talk much about his personal life, his past relationships. I respected that. I wasn't prying, but I sensed a certain loneliness in him, a melancholy that mirrored my own at times. Perhaps it was the nature of his work, always observing, always on the move. Or perhaps it was something deeper. One afternoon, about a week into his stay, I was struggling with a particular section of the Maine Coast Commission. The way the waves crashed against the rocks, the spray, the sheer untamed energy of it. I couldn't quite get it right. I must have sighed audibly because a little while later, there was a soft knock on my open studio door. He was working in his room, but the door to my actual painting space was ajar. Michael stood there, a hesitant look on his face. "Sorry to interrupt. Everything all right?" "Oh, hi, Michael." "Yes, well, no, not really." I gestured vaguely at the canvas. "This wave is defeating me. It looks more like a fluffy cloud than a ton of raging water." He came further into the room, standing beside me, looking at the painting. He was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. I could feel the warmth of his arm close to mine, smell that faint outdoorsy scent again. It was distracting, but not unpleasantly so. "May I?" he asked, gesturing towards the canvas. "Please," I said. "Any suggestions are welcome." He didn't offer verbal advice. Instead, he picked up a spare piece of charcoal from my tray. On a scrap piece of paper, with a few swift, economical lines, he sketched the curve of a wave, the explosive energy of its crest, the heavy downward pull of the water. It was remarkable. In less than a minute, he'd captured the very essence of what I'd been struggling with for days. "It's about the energy," he said, his voice low. "Where it comes from, where it's going, the tension before it breaks." I stared at his sketch, then back at my canvas. Suddenly, I saw it. It wasn't just about the shape, but the force behind it. "Wow," I breathed. "That's incredibly helpful." He put the charcoal down. Sometimes a different perspective helps. He looked at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You were close. All the elements are there." That small moment, standing side by side, sharing that creative problem, felt significant. It was a different kind of connection than our evening talks. It was a meeting of artistic minds, a shared understanding that went beyond words. As he was about to leave the studio, he paused at the door. "You know, Eleanor," he said, his back still mostly to me, "you said you just dabble. You shouldn't sell yourself short. Your work has real heart." His words warmed me more than the afternoon sun streaming through the window. He left, and I turned back to my canvas, a new sense of purpose, a new clarity. The wave still wasn't perfect, but now I knew how to approach it. And I realized that Michael's presence in my house was becoming more than just convenient for him or a favor for Sarah. It was becoming important to me. The quiet man with the observant eyes was slowly, unexpectedly, coaxing parts of me back to life that I thought had long since gone dormant. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. It felt alive. The days continued to fold into one another, each marked by the quiet rhythm of Michael's presence and our growing, unspoken understanding. We didn't pry into each other's pasts, didn't ask probing questions. Instead, we communicated in shared glances over coffee, in the comfortable silences that settled between us in the evenings, in the mutual respect we showed for each other's work and space. It was a delicate dance, this unexpected friendship, and I found myself cherishing its subtlety. One Saturday, the weather turned crisp and golden, a perfect autumn day. I'd planned to rake leaves, a task I usually found meditative. Michael emerged from his room mid-morning, looking a little restless. "I need to stretch my legs," he announced, running a hand through his already tousled hair. "Too much screen time. You heading out?" "Just into the garden to tackle the leaves," I said, gesturing with the rake I was holding. "Mind if I give you a hand?" he asked surprisingly. "I could use the fresh air. And besides," he added, a twinkle in his eye, "I owe you for about 1,000 cups of coffee by now." I laughed. I wouldn't say no to some help. It's a bigger job than it looks. So we spent the next few hours in the garden together. Michael, it turned out, was a surprisingly efficient leaf raker. We worked in comfortable tandem, the scrape of our rakes a rhythmic counterpoint to the rustle of the leaves. We didn't talk much, but the shared activity created its own kind of communication. I found myself watching him sometimes, the easy way he moved, the focused expression on his face even when engaged in a simple task. He seemed different outdoors, more relaxed, as if the open sky and fresh air were his natural elements. When we were finally done, two enormous piles of leaves standing like golden monuments on the lawn, we collapsed onto the porch steps, tired but satisfied. "Thanks, Michael," I said, pushing a stray strand of hair from my forehead. "I haven't gotten that done so quickly in years." "My pleasure." He leaned back against the porch railing, looking out at the blaze of autumn color in the yard. "It's beautiful here. You've made a real sanctuary." "It's taken time," I admitted. "This garden has seen me through a lot." I paused, then found myself saying, "Mark loved this garden. He had a particular fondness for those old rose bushes." I pointed to the gnarled, thorny bushes against the fence, still stubbornly holding onto a few late blooms. It was the most I'd volunteered about Mark in Michael's presence. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the roses. Then, quietly, "It's good to have things that hold memories. Keeps them close." His understanding was so gentle, so lacking in artifice, that it made it easy to share these small pieces of my past. With him, I didn't feel the need for the carefully constructed cheerfulness I often presented to the world. Later that evening, after a simple supper of soup and crusty bread, we were in the living room. I was sketching, and Michael was looking through a book of Ansel Adams photographs he'd found on my shelf. He was a master of light, Michael murmured, more to himself than to me. I agreed. There's such a spiritual quality to his landscapes. Michael closed the book and looked at me. Eleanor, he began, his tone a little more serious than usual. My exhibition, the opening is in Boston in just under 2 weeks. I was wondering if you're not busy, if you consider coming. I looked up, surprised. To your opening? Oh, Michael, I don't know. I'd like you to be there, he said, his gaze direct and unwavering. Your perspective, it's become important to me. And, he added, a hint of a smile, you can tell me honestly if my head's gotten too big. I felt a warmth spread through me. It was a genuine invitation, a desire for my presence, not just polite obligation. The thought of going to Boston, of seeing his work displayed, of being part of that significant moment for him, it was unexpectedly appealing. I'd like that very much, Michael, I said softly. I'd be honored. His smile widened, reaching his eyes. Good. It's a date, then. Well, not a date, he amended quickly, a slight flush rising on his cheekbones. An event. You know what I mean. I smiled back. I know what you mean. But in that moment, something shifted. The word date, however quickly retracted, hung in the air for a beat too long. It highlighted a line we hadn't consciously acknowledged, but had both been careful not to cross. The line between a comfortable, respectful cohabitation and something else, something more. The subtle tension that had always been a quiet undercurrent in our interactions suddenly felt a little less subtle, a little more charged. He cleared his throat and looked back at the Ansel Adams book, though I doubted he was seeing the pictures. I returned to my sketchbook, but my hand wasn't quite steady. The air in the cozy living room felt thick with unspoken thoughts, with the dawning awareness of a connection that was deepening in ways neither of us had anticipated. My best friend's brother, the favor that was turning into so much more. I wondered if Sarah had any idea. Probably not. This was something quiet, something just between Michael and me, unfolding in the golden autumn light of my once empty house. And I realized with a little jolt of surprise that I was more than just curious about what happened next. I was hopeful. The week leading up to Michael's exhibition passed with a new layer of awareness between us. It wasn't awkward, not exactly, but there was a heightened sense of each other's presence, a subtle electricity that hadn't been there before. Conversations were still easy, but sometimes our eyes would meet for a moment longer than necessary, or a casual touch, passing a coffee cup, brushing past each other in the hallway, would send a little jolt through me. I found myself paying more attention to my appearance, choosing my clothes with a bit more care, even putting on a touch of lipstick some mornings. It was silly, perhaps, for a woman my age, but it felt nice, like a part of me was reawakening. Michael, too, seemed different. He was still focused on his preparations, but there was a lighter quality to him, an almost boyish enthusiasm when he talked about the final details of the exhibition. He showed me the catalog proofs, his name prominent on the cover. There was a quiet pride in his demeanor that was endearing. The day of the opening arrived, a bright, chilly Saturday. Michael was up early, pacing a bundle of nervous energy. "You're sure you still want to do this?" he asked as I came down for breakfast, dressed in a new silk blouse I bought for the occasion and a pair of smart black trousers. "It's probably going to be a crush of arty types, a lot of pretentious chatter." "I wouldn't miss it," I said firmly, pouring myself some coffee. "And I'm looking forward to seeing you in your element. Besides," I added teasingly, "someone needs to make sure you don't hide in a corner all night." He managed a smile. "You know me too well." We drove to Boston in his Jeep. The conversation was sporadic, a mixture of his nervous anticipation and my attempts to keep him calm. He'd opted for a dark gray suit, no tie, which made him look distinguished and even more handsome than usual. I felt a little flutter of something warm and proprietary as I imagined walking into the gallery with him. The gallery was in a chic, renovated warehouse district, all exposed brick and polished concrete floors. Even before we went in, I could see through the large windows that it was already crowded. Music and a buzz of conversation spilled out onto the street. Michael took a deep breath as he switched off the ignition. "Well, here goes nothing. Here goes everything," I corrected gently. "This is your moment, Michael. Enjoy it." He looked at me, then his eyes searching mine. "Thanks for being here, Eleanor. It means more than you know." He reached across the small space between our seats, and for a moment, I thought he was going to take my hand. Instead, his fingers brushed lightly against my arm. A fleeting touch, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "Come on," he said, his voice a little husky. "Let's face the music." Walking into the gallery was like stepping into another world. The stark white walls were adorned with Michael's photographs, beautifully lit and impressively displayed. They were even more powerful in person, large-scale prints that drew you into their depths. I saw familiar images he'd shown me on his laptop, but also many new ones, each telling a profound story. People were everywhere, holding wine glasses, talking animatedly. Almost immediately, Michael was swept away by a curator, then a journalist, then a series of well-wishers. I stepped back, content to observe. I saw Sarah across the room, beaming with pride, and waved. She bustled over, giving me a tight hug. "Ellie, you made it. Isn't this incredible? My little brother, a bona fide art star." "It's wonderful, Sarah," I said, genuinely impressed. "The photos are breathtaking." "And you look lovely," she said, giving me an appraising look. "Having Michael around seems to agree with you." There was a knowing glint in her that made me blush slightly. "He's been a very easy house guest," I said a little too quickly. Sarah just smiled. "Of course he has." I spent the next hour or so wandering through the exhibition, truly immersing myself in Michael's work. I saw the landscapes that spoke of solitude and immense beauty, the portraits that captured the resilience and dignity of the human spirit. Each photograph was a window into his soul, into the way he saw the world, and I felt an overwhelming sense of connection to him, understanding him more deeply through his art than I ever could through words alone. I found myself standing for a long time in front of a particular photograph. It was a quiet image, not as dramatic as some of the others. It was a shot of an old weathered wooden door, set in a crumbling stone wall, somewhere in what looked like a Mediterranean village. A single red geranium bloomed in a pot beside it. There was something about the play of light and shadow, the textures, the sense of history and untold stories within that doorway that captivated me. It spoke of home, of passage, of beauty found in unexpected places. "That one's a bit different from the others, isn't it?" Michael's voice, close behind me, made me jump slightly. He had managed to extricate himself from the crowds. "It's my favorite," I said, turning to him. "It's hopeful and incredibly beautiful." He looked at the photograph, then at me. His expression was soft, his eyes holding a warmth that seemed reserved just for me. I took that in a small village in Crete. I was there for weeks, trying to capture the spirit of the place, and I kept coming back to this doorway. It felt like an invitation. He paused, then said, his voice lower, kind of like showing up on your doorstep a few weeks ago. My breath caught in my throat. The noise of the gallery, the chatter, the music all seemed to fade away. There was just Michael, his intense gaze, and the unspoken emotion hanging between us. It was an unexpected invitation. I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "The best ones often are," he said. He took a step closer. The space between us felt charged, alive. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, mixed with something that was just Michael, that outdoorsy, campfire essence I'd come to associate with him. "Eleanor," he began, and I just knew that this was a pivotal moment. The culmination of all those quiet evenings, shared coffees, unspoken understandings. He reached out, and this time his fingers didn't just brush my arm. They found my hand, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. It was a simple touch, yet it felt profound, electric. "I know this is sudden, maybe," he said, his eyes searching mine. "And I know I'm just your best friend's brother who needed a place to crash. But these past few weeks, being with you, talking with you, it's been," he struggled for words. "It's been a revelation, Eleanor." My heart was hammering against my ribs. I couldn't speak, could only look at him, hoping my eyes conveyed what I was feeling. "I haven't felt this connected to someone in a very long time," he continued, his voice earnest and low, meant only for me. "Maybe ever. I know my life is complicated, always on the move. And yours is settled here. But," he took another deep breath, "when this exhibition is launched, when things calm down a bit, I was wondering if you'd be open to exploring this, whatever this is between us." There it was, the question, the possibility. My mind reeled, but my heart felt surprisingly calm, surprisingly certain. This quiet, observant man, who had drifted into my life so unexpectedly, had seen me, truly seen me, in a way no one had in years. He had reawakened a part of me I thought was lost. The noise of the gallery slowly filtered back into my awareness. Someone called Michael's name. He glanced over his shoulder, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, then looked back at me, his expression urgent, questioning. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, Michael," I said, my voice clearer now, stronger. "Yes, I would." A slow smile spread across his face, a smile of such genuine relief and happiness that it made my own heart soar. It was a smile that promised new beginnings, unexpected journeys. In the midst of the crowded, noisy gallery, surrounded by his life's work, we stood for a moment in our own quiet bubble, a silent agreement passing between us. The favor he'd needed had led to something far more profound, an emotional connection that felt as real and tangible as the photograph of the hopeful doorway before us. The future was uncertain, of course, but for the first time in a long, long time, I felt a thrilling sense of anticipation for what it might hold. The rest of the evening passed in a warm, happy haze. Michael was, understandably, in high demand, but his eyes kept finding mine across the room, sharing small smiles, silent reassurances. I talked more with Sarah, who, I now realized, had probably suspected something was developing between us all along. Her knowing winks and subtle questions made more sense now. She seemed genuinely thrilled, her affection for both me and her brother evident. When the crowd finally began to thin, Michael made his way back to me. He looked tired but exhilarated. "Ready to escape," he murmured, his hand finding mine again, this time lacing his fingers through mine in a way that felt both natural and wonderfully new. "Whenever you are," I replied, my heart giving a happy little skip at the casual intimacy of his touch. We said our goodbyes, Michael thanking the gallery owner and the few remaining guests. Walking out into the cool night air with him felt different. Before, we were Eleanor and Michael, housemates by circumstance. Now, holding his hand, there was a sense of us, a nascent partnership, a shared journey just beginning. The drive back to my house was quiet, but it was a comfortable, contented silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. Michael reached over and briefly squeezed my hand where it rested on the console. When we pulled into my driveway, he turned off the engine but made no move to get out. The dashboard lights cast a soft glow on his face, highlighting